All right, guys, today we are talking to my great friend, Michael Port, and we're chatting about finances. If you don't know who Michael is, he is the author of 9 books. A few of them became perennial bestsellers, made it onto the New York Times list, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. A few of them won awards from 800 CEO Read and Amazon. And the 3 most popular are Book Yourself Solid, Steal the Show, and The Referable Speaker. Together, Michael and his beautiful wife, Amy, built Heroic Public Speaking HQ, which is a performance training center to develop and nurture the next generation of pro speakers, along with CEOs and founders, best-selling authors, business owners, and people leading movements, and those trying to advance important causes. You can learn all about that at heroicpublicspeaking.com, and we'll link to that in the show notes. I also talk about my own personal experience going through their program at the end of this interview. So guys, we are talking about finances today, and I'm going to ask Michael all sorts of questions about what makes his business profitable and how he talks to his family about finances and tracks expenses and where he would invest or not invest in. I like this because Michael's not a traditional wealth advisor, which nothing against them. I have great friends that are wealth advisors. I think they do amazing work. Michael's a business owner who just studied finance for his own personal interests. He wanted to take the deep dive there. So I think he's one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, and interesting people. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. There's so much to this episode, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. So if you enjoy the show, let us know. You can write a review, frontrodads.com/review. And also, guys, we have a workshop coming up on May 5th. And we also have a online summit coming up May 19th. If you're interested in learning more about Front Row Dads, just go check it all out at the website, frontrodads.com. All right, now let's get into this conversation with Michael. All right, Michael Port, when we jumped on the line to record, it took you about a half a second to launch into some deep, profound thought, philosophy about life. There's no small talk. There's nothing that was just an easing your way in. It was like, we just jumped right in. And I'm wondering, man, if there is something to that, is that how you always enter a conversation? Is it because we have rapport together? Is it because you just have a lot of time on your hands right now to be in deep thought? I mean, is that a brand for you? I don't know.
Yes, I think all of the above.
Okay.
I think I have way too much time on my hands these days.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking way too deeply about things. But in all seriousness, I actually feel more comfortable having, I guess, what you'd refer to as deep conversations that seem like they're about meaningful stuff, at least, than small talk. I spoke with someone yesterday from a private equity group that had approached me about a potential acquisition of the business. Very early stages. I don't want anyone who's listening to think, wait, they're selling HPS? No, not at all. We get approached on a regular basis, at least from time to time. And I was having a lot of trouble doing the small talk. It's just not something I enjoy. I feel often a little uncomfortable. I don't feel the rhythms. So I feel much more comfortable in a deeper conversation for whatever reason. So yes, is the answer. And we also do have some rapport. So yeah. I know what you like to get into.
Tell me a little bit about this space that you have on your hands, because I see you as somebody with 8 books and a big business and lots going on. And every time I look at your world, it's like, man, I'm so impressed by what you've built. Such great intention. What does space look like for you right now? Is that meaning how have you created that space? Is it just because you've got the systems and you have the staff and you now have worked your way out of being so important in every moment that you now have a little breathing room?
Yeah, I think a couple things have been really significant for us. And number one, we've been doing it for a long time. So we've worked out a lot of kinks. We've tried a lot of different things that ended up either in the garbage or just in a file for maybe someday. And we've gotten incredibly focused and clear on what we do. We do it again and again and again. So we have got consistency, steady flow. I feel like I've got the strongest team that I've ever had. And I think that I'm doing a better job of leading because I'm a little more hands off. Mm. So people feel like they're in charge of the work that they do and they do a great job. And then they often let me know how it went. And they'll come to me for support and resources, but I'm not doing any micromanaging, which I think I did in the past from time to time. So I think that's helping. But on September 1st, we had a flood at HBS HQ from Hurricane Ida. And not just a little flood, we had 5 feet of water. And so it totally destroyed the 10,000 foot headquarters that we had built from the ground up. And as a result, we needed to move spaces. So we did that as quickly as we could. And then we were back up and running in short order. But what it did is it required us to sit down and think, what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? How do we want to do this going forward? Because essentially, it's like everything just got leveled. The space was destroyed. So we had our intellectual property and our reputation, our customer base, et cetera, but our space was gone. So that was an opportunity to reimagine what the future looked like. And what we said is, how can we make it as simple as possible? And as a result, I think we're in a pretty strong space at this time.
I love that question. Right now, having just moved into a new home, it feels like there's 1,000 things to focus on. Yeah. We want to do everything at once. And as exciting as that is, it's also completely overwhelming. My nervous system feels out of control when there's 30 things that need to happen now for this place to be great. And I'm reminded about how enjoyable my life is when it's really simple and I can just get into a rhythm and a cadence.
Yeah, well, so I'm 51 now, and I've spent most of my life being a maximizer, which sounds like what you just described. Whatever I want to do, I want it to be the best. I don't want to do it unless it's going to be fantastic. And I'm always trying to find more ways to add value. And sometimes when you're like that, you go overboard. You do too much.
Yeah.
And your returns are diminishing over time from that kind of effort, and you can exhaust yourself. So I've had to work on moving away from being a maximizer and instead being a satisficer. Meaning, okay, that's satisfactory. I'm satisfied with that. That's enough. Fine. And let's just make a couple things really, really great. And so the question that I've been forced to ask myself on a regular basis is, what does enough mean? And I think that's when I started focusing much more on the reason that we have this business. Because I think when I started my business in the early 2000s, a lot of my impetus for doing it was, to have some control over my life, but also to try to do something impressive that would get me a lot of attention and applause. And hopefully people would tell me that I was smart and interesting. And I think that...
And they have.
Well, yeah, they do. But
you've received all of that.
I have, but I don't always believe it.
Yeah, I get that.
And I think, well, maybe it just seems like that. I'm not as interesting as you're suggesting. So I do have that challenge. But so when I look back on a lot of the choices I've made around the business, I keep coming to the conclusion that many of the choices I made were driven by the desire for approval. Even how I designed the model for the business was driven by the desire for approval. I mean, look, I didn't become an actor in the first place when I was young because I didn't want approval. I mean,
sure.
I've never met too many actors who don't want approval, but it really can be the killer of any creative dream, that need for approval, because you often will pander, you'll make choices that are weaker choices, or you'll burn yourself out because, you'll get to the point where you're getting a lot of approval and then you still will feel like you need more. So you're constantly, you don't have enough. And when I started asking myself, well, what is actually enough in the business? And what's the point of this business? Is it to do something impressive and get attention or no, it can't be. There's got to be 2 reasons for it. Number one, it adds some value to the world in some meaningful way. But even that, that's optional. You don't have to do that in a business. That's your choice. That's important to me. But secondly, that it produces all of the income we need for the rest of our life. And I think that in this space that we operate in, thought leadership, authorship, speakership, even lots of different types of entrepreneurship, I think a lot of folks, including myself, go into these endeavors because it seems exciting, because we'll get the rave reviews and applause. And yes, we'll also get lots of money at the same time. And we like the lifestyle associated with it, a certain lifestyle. Sounds pretty cool. And we like the idea of being the CEO, founder of a company that's growing and it's exciting. But when I ask my friends who are entrepreneurs, who are authors, speakers, well, what are you doing with all the money that you're making? They're like, what do you mean? Like, no, but what do you do with the money that you make? Well, we put a lot of it back into the business because that's really your most important investment. That's where you can get the best returns because that's what they've been told. by lots of different people who may be self-interested in getting
Sure.
a business owner to think like that. Maybe not. Or they're spending a lot of money. Like I spent a lot of money. When I look back at the amount of money that, that I've earned in my businesses since I started, I clocked almost $60 million. But I don't have $60 million in the bank. Obviously, a lot of it has gone to the expenses of running the business.
Sure.
Right? To make $1 million in profit, it takes us about $2 million in expenses, just the way that we've designed the business. So it's not a bad margin. And at scale, that's, it's not bad. So I started really thinking deeply, like, what's the point of this thing? And what's my exit? And how long am I going to do this? I came to the conclusion, I had this realization that, wait a second. This business should be designed to be a cash flow machine that produces capital for outside investments that can produce both income and appreciation over the long term, such that they get to a point where they exceed the revenue that I earn in my business, or the income that I earn in my business, rather. And then I can decide whether or not I want to continue to run the business. Do I want to sell it? Well, okay, then I have a lot more choice at that point, because I don't need to sell it, and I can sell it to who I want to. Or if I want to wait for a price, I can wait for a price. Or I want to give it to my staff and just say, listen, cut me and Amy a little check every year for the next number of years, and it's yours. Do I want to say, hey, John, do you want heroic public speaking? Yeah, so it gives you options. I wish I realized that in 2003, because if I had done that in 2003, I would have had enough money put aside in other investments probably by 2010 to know that I didn't have to work again. But I didn't. I kept spending that money or putting it back into the business. And yeah, it grew the business, but I don't need to put money into the business like someone who needs to buy massive amounts of infrastructure or, trucks, things like that. So my expenses are not that high. But you understand the point? It's like, what's the point of all of this unless it's going to give us long-term security?
Yeah.
Because you may not want to run at the pace that you're running for the rest of your life. And the idea that you're going to sell your business is just an idea at this point. Even if your whole plan is to sell that business, meaning I didn't design HPS to be a business that you'd then sell. I would probably have designed it differently from the beginning. But if you are an entrepreneur who says, listen, our plan is to exit, how do you know that's going to happen? How do you know you're going to get the money you want? How do you know that the entire economy is not going to change on a dime and all of a sudden what you're doing is no longer irrelevant? How do you know that a competitor doesn't come in and make you irrelevant? There's so many different factors or scenarios that you might face that you cannot predict. Winston Churchill once said, the future is uncertain. It's a mistake to look too far ahead. Only one link in the chain of destiny can be handled at a time.
Right.
And I love that. So when I started looking at, okay, what do I do? Okay, one link at a time. How do you make the business consistently profitable so that so that you adhere to the profit first mentality, Mike McCallow's work of you take profit first and then you pay your expenses. And if you don't have much for the rest, then you're going to be using a lot less to run your business because that profit's going to come to you first.
Yep.
But then second, you've got to carve out as much money as you possibly can from that profit or from whatever income you're taking and move it into external investments that both appreciate in value and produce cash flow. Because like I grew up in a time when investment advisors told everybody, we should save 10% of your income. Well, if you're making $10 million in income a year, save 10%. That's going to be fine. Even then, I think you should save 70%, but it's just generally not enough, especially in the early days of development. If your first year in business, you make $100,000, so you save 10. Okay. It's not going to get you that far. Not enough to create independence.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next thing is looking at how much can you save? How much can you carve off and put into other investments? And that requires a big conversation for a lot of us around expenses with our spouses, with our kids. It often means a major change in thinking and a major change in behavior. Because most financial success from an investment perspective, at least in my experience and from what I've read, is in large part based on behavior. It's more behavior oriented. Your results are more determined by your behavior than even how much money you have to invest. And, when you're somebody who likes to spend a lot of money, you've got a lot of questions to ask yourself, like why? why do you feel the need to have fancy things? Why do you feel the need to make everything look really perfect for everybody else? What's that about? Is it because you were the poor kid in school and everybody else seemed really rich and you didn't want to seem like you weren't also one of them? Maybe.
Michael, are you talking directly to me right now? Hold on, I think we just transitioned to a therapy session. Hold on, dude. I'm going to start crying. You're speaking directly to me.
Yeah. Well, what was that like?
Well, which part? You brought up a couple of things, like growing up, wishing I had more. I mean, what came to mind immediately when you said that was just not having the cool clothes. My mom wanted to buy my clothes from the Navy Exchange, the naval base. And I grew up in Virginia Beach, and the kids were wearing Billabong, Gotcha, Quicksilver. I remember taking my mom to a shop one time, a surf shop, and she's like, "There's no way in hell I'm paying that much money for a sweatshirt or whatever it was." Even I knew it was kind of insane, but when you start to really understand that. But no, I mean, I wrestle with a lot of this. I mean, even last night I came to Tatiana and I was like, which of these SUVs do you like? And she goes, "No, I don't want a new car." I go, "Baby, you drive this old minivan. You're like this, spicy, hot, Russian, amazing, like beautifully energetic and colorful person. You're driving a gray minivan. I want to buy you something else." And
which is
I don't want something else.
Right, which is exactly why she does not need a 6 Series BMW.
Right. Exactly. Dude, it's so funny. But yeah, I do get trapped in this space. So, but,
and it's tough with the kids. It's really tough because the external pressures that they have on them, especially if you're living in a high cost of living area, is going to be pretty intense. When you go to the kids' schools and the kids are all driving really fancy cars and their clothes are still ripped up, of course. The best dad joke of all time is, "Did you get a discount on those?" Is that why they have holes in them? And so what we've been doing with the kids for many years now is talking about this relentlessly.
Yeah.
So much so that they get annoyed. But I want them to see everything. I want them to know what we have, what we don't have, and them to understand that what we have or don't have is not necessarily going to influence how we spend. Meaning, just because we have money saved, it doesn't mean that we're going to spend more of it. There's a big difference between rich and wealthy. So if you're rich, it means you're spending the money you make. If you're wealthy, it means you're using that money to produce more money and you're growing it over time.
Exactly.
And so with the kids, the kids have budgets. They get to buy their own clothes, school supplies, you name it, anything that they need, even Ruby's camp. Camp's expensive. It's like $6,000 for a few weeks. So even that, she saves for every single month in her budget. We give her, here's what you're getting. You got to categorize all of it. Everything needs a line item. And then they have to track it so that, if they want any more money, they've got to track what they're spending in the app that we use for this. We use an app called You Need a Budget, YNAB, YNAB.com. Love it. And, they resist it a little bit sometimes, but they also are learning a lot. And since they started doing it, their conversations are different. They'll often look at things and go, "Nah, I don't really think that's valuable. I don't think so. No. I'll think about it a little bit before I spend my money." And they're investing now. We're teaching them how to invest. One thing I'm really worried about with the kids is the whole meme stock craze. Robinhood, Wall Street Bets, GameStop, AMC. It's really, really dangerous stuff because you don't need any more studies to know that nobody knows what an individual stock is going to do or not going to do unless you have some kind of insider information or you've manipulated the market in some way. Nobody knows. There are definitely a handful of people on Wall Street who are remarkable at beating the market in certain ways. I mean, there are quantitative hedge funds that do all their trading with computers. Medallion, makes like a 66% average return per year, over the last multiple decades. I mean, crazy numbers. But very few people do this and they don't take any money. So they won't invest our money. They only use their money for that fund now, which was always the thing I thought about investment advisors. When I met investment advisors, I was like, wait, if you need my money to make money, are you really that good at investing? Wouldn't you just invest your own money? Like, what do you need to waste your time dealing with the insufferable questions that I had? Because the people who are trained to advise around money are generally not trained to beat the market. But the argument is that they're going to. and it's a false argument. So in any event, sorry, I just got a little soapbox there. Not a particularly articulate one, but
you're passionate, man. Which I love. This is great.
But the meme stock stuff is really very, very scary to me. There's a great book that I just read called "The Revolution That Wasn't,"
mm-hmm.
and it details the whole meme stock craze, and it shows you how the people that lost, the people that got hurt, were the individual retail investors, the 20-something-year-old guy. It was mostly men, 18 to 34, who were looking for something to do during this initial period of quarantine. A lot of them had been doing a lot of online gambling in sports, but all the sports
mm-hmm.
stopped. And so then they moved over. And as a result, a lot of people lost money. But I think that what you're looking at is a lot of folks who are looking at crypto, NFTs, DAOs, and these meme stocks as the new get-rich-quick schemes. And most of them are multi-level marketing schemes.
Define meme stock.
So a meme stock is a stock that thousands and thousands of people will buy because people in certain forums like Wall Street Bets, which is a subreddit, are all saying it's going to shoot the moon. It's going to go to the moon. Buy. And so if they can get everybody to buy it, we'll raise the price. And you'll squeeze out any of the short sellers, which was part of the pitch that they were making. We're going to stick it to the man. We're going to take these hedge funds out. A couple hedge funds lost a few $1 billion, and then their friends invested more in the fund the day after. They got their money back, and now they're carrying on. And then hundreds and hundreds of other hedge funds made a lot of money once they saw all this volatility. They started playing with it, and so the person who ended up getting squeezed out was actually the individual stockholder who just kept buying as it was going up. But eventually the thing crashed and they're left holding the bag. So a meme stock is just something that everybody starts doing because it gets passed around as a meme.
Right.
And there's no fundamentals. Nobody's buying it because they've researched the company. It's just, it's shooting the moon. I'm going to buy now. It's going to go up. I'm going to hold on, and then I'm going to sell. And of course, if you know anything about stocks, that's a pretty dangerous way to invest. So, our oldest, he's got an app on Robinhood. He likes the idea of having a little portfolio and some crypto and some this. And
you have to be 18 to use that. You have to be 18
but you can lie very easily.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they all lie. All you have to do is change the buttons. Change the little forms. So in any event, I'm worried about the kids and the sort of next generation of money making schemes because it's so much more complex than even what we faced, and it's so much harder to regulate.
Right.
These pay-per-play games where you get paid to play it, but of course, you're not making any money. The people who you're playing for are making all the money, just like in a multi-level marketing scheme. So, obviously my primary focus is not on this, but, when you asked me to come on the show and talk about this, just because we had started chatting about finance, I sat down and I started writing about, what would I want to say? Like, this is not what I normally talk about. And I wrote 20,000 words in, I think, 2 weeks. Most of them were pretty bad.
Is this book number 9?
10, I think.
Book number 10.
If you count the multiple editions.
Okay, all right.
But what I tried to do is I tried to codify, like, how simple is this process of building wealth long term? And I think it's really this simple. Okay, if you look at your business as a machine to generate cash flow for external investments so that you are saving that money and growing that money so that you can decide as early as you want when you no longer have to work in that business. Okay. Then you've got to figure out, how much do I need to have invested so that it produces enough income for me every single year for the rest of my life? Once you know what that total number is, you can make some assumptions about what the market may do in the future, and we should be as conservative as possible. And then we know what our number is. So then we're working to keep putting more money into the market or into our real estate investments or whatever is important or relevant for us to try to get to that place. But it should be simpler than I think most people make it out to be. One of the things that I see in the entrepreneurial space is a lot of big talk around financial products that make a lot of money for the people selling them, but are often not necessary for the people buying them. And in fact, can be really deleterious. You can actually lose a lot of money or waste a lot of money buying some of these financial products. So once you start to seem like you have some money, and most people who own a business, they often seem like they have more money than they do. Like I've always said, people always think I have a lot more money than I do just because the business is popular and it's kind of well known. But you start getting approached, you're a target. And so people say, hey, listen, have you thought about a captive insurance? You really need a captive insurance company because that's the best way to protect your money from the government, because those are your biggest expenses. So I started looking into a captive insurance company. The first thing I realized, okay, I don't actually need one. So there's no actual business case for us to have a captive insurance company, which makes it illegal. They said, don't worry about it. We can make sure it's above board and legal, but it's actually not. So it's an IRS flag, red flag, any of these captive insurance companies. Okay, then they said, well, here's how much you would need to put in every year in order to even make it break even. Or this was the calculations I did. I knew how much I'd have to put into this each year in order to cover the $40,000 or $50,000 a year in fees based on tax savings over a long period of time. And then I got this money locked up in there. I mean, it just looked like an absolute ridiculous idea for me, even at the stage that I was in. And then the next thing is permanent life insurance policies. And, you got to get this whole life because you can borrow against it. Well, yeah, you can borrow against it, but you're also going to pay 4.5% or 5% to borrow against it. And then you're going to pay much too much for your insurance in it. You're going to pay too much for the person selling it. And you're not going to get enough gain in that investment to actually make sense to actually pull anything out of it. Because if you're paying 4.5% to borrow the money and you're only making 5% minus the 3% in fees that you're paying, the arbitrage works against you and for the insurance company. Now, yes, they can be designed in a way that is appropriate for some people. Yes, there is always the case where it's for some people, it's absolutely appropriate. And at some point, I may decide to use it if my estate is so big that I want to use it just as a way to shelter some money from taxes. Mm-hmm. I think this is the critical piece. A lot of people like us who are entrepreneurial, who are futuristic, who are maximizers, we're always looking for the edge. We're always looking for the next thing. We're always on the hunt for whatever is fun, cool, interesting. We're the biggest suckers. We're the easiest for somebody to say to, listen, this is really, yes, most people don't need these, but the 1% of the people need these. And you're one of those people. You're in the 1%. Oh, really? Well, that's good. Of course. I mean, I thought I was, but now I thank you for telling me. Yeah. So I'll waste all this money with you because you're making me feel like I'm doing the latest, greatest cutting edge thing. When in fact, you don't need hacks. You don't need every single financial product. Even if you did nothing else except buy the total US stock market and left it there for decades, you're generally going to spend less money to do it. And you're going to come out ahead from a financial perspective. And you're not going to have to think about it all the time or worry about it or deal with the paperwork, and all the mashugana around all these different messy products that you're investing in. So I just say for anybody that does identify with us in this maximizer, striver, looking for the next thing, what's the greatest thing? Just ask yourself, have you ever gotten excited about those kinds of products because you think you're going to have the angle, you figured it out, or you connected with somebody that's figured it out? For the most part, I don't think many of the people selling those products have figured it out. And I would say this, if you do not understand exactly how it works, if you cannot teach your family, your friends, everybody you know exactly how that financial product works to the penny, then you don't understand it. And we should never buy something we don't understand.
Yeah. Unless you like to gamble.
And gambling is great.
There's a part of me that feels like when I first heard about Bitcoin 10 years ago, I was just like, not now. But if I would have just thrown $5,000 at it, because why not roll the dice?
Yeah.
There's so many of those examples, but I understand that by saying that, it would literally be the same in that case as gambling, just going to Vegas, playing war.
John, we all have that, and it's survivorship bias.
Yeah.
Because Bitcoin survived. So you said, I knew about it. I should have done it. Well, if Bitcoin didn't survive, you'd be like, well, thank God I didn't put my money there.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Which is why, for sure, gambling is the term that comes to mind for me with something like that.
And here's what a lot of people in the finance industry say. So look, if you really want to do that, then set aside 10% of your, portfolio and gamble the heck out of it.
Yeah, have
that
fun.
Turns you on, right? But if you have addictive personality, that 10% may become 20. You're like, I really know what it is. I'm going to take another 10%. And all of a sudden now you're
exactly right.
You're hyper exposed. And I'm not saying that nobody should have any cryptocurrency. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that I'm bashing all of it. I'm just bashing most of it.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to this. How well do you really understand it? Do you understand the underlying factors that influence all the different moves in that particular market? Do you understand what the financial incentive is for the people who are running the exchanges? So you understand where the conflicts of interest are. If you don't, then I would say stay away from it. That's what I do. If I can't figure all of that out, I go, I'm just staying away from it.
Here's one of the things I really appreciate about you, Michael, is that it feels to me, and this is from an outsider looking in, knowing you a bit, that you've built your success by really looking at what makes sense for you and not always following the crowd, but really finding some wisdom from within. I think about this as it relates to a question I asked you years ago about developing your business and looking to outside influences. And I remember you saying, I actually don't want to look too many times at the outside influences because I want to see those. And I'm not quoting you directly, but I think it was, don't want that to influence my thinking. I want to know what I think. I want those ideas to come from within. That's what I took from the statement, at least.
100%. I don't look at so people will ask me, hey, so what do you know about this company that teaches speaking? What do you know about this company? And I say, absolutely nothing. I've never heard of that one, or I've heard of that one, or I know the person who runs that. I like them. They're tremendous, but I don't know anything about what they actually do. And I like that. It's not for everybody. Some people really like to study, what everybody else
the copy paste model for sure.
Yeah, it's great due diligence. It's great research. You could easily argue that it's a mistake for me to not look at that. I've just taken a different approach. I've generally built our offerings based on what our clients were clamoring for.
Yeah.
Everything that we do is an outcropping of a request that we had.
Yeah.
That's how we built it. So, it seemed to work for us. And, John, the way we do things is so different than the industry overall, and we come from a different space. So as a result, we're kind of making it up. It's our own process.
So as it relates to, I want to drill down into some practical habits here for a minute to take all of what we just shared and look at it, especially through your lens as Michael Port, the family man, the businessman, a guy with kids who's looking after his family. Take us behind the scenes a little bit with how do you actually create time in your schedule to think about these things, to make these decisions in your life, to have the conversations that you mentioned earlier with your kids. Mm-hmm. Like, how much time over the course of the week is needed in order to really be attentive to your finances, to do the work, to make the progress, to talk with your kids? Like, what does it actually look like? Not in theory.
So I think for me, it's probably more time than necessary because I geek out on it. I get into it these days. And I think it's probably worth noting that I was never, I'm not mathematically inclined. I was not interested in finance when I was young. I frankly thought it was beyond me. I didn't understand the words they were using. I'm dyslexic, so I still don't understand why when yields go up, bond prices go down. I mean, I do technically, but it always was a struggle for me. So here's how it works. I think generally at the beginning, it takes more time. So when Amy and I really decided to make a big change in terms of how we managed our finances, so that we focus much more on savings, but also making sure that we only spend money where we wanted to express value. Because I think in this day and age, in this hyper-consumer society that we live in, we often express our values through what we spend our money on. If you give me your credit card receipts, I know a lot about you, what you value. And as a result, we wanted to look at, well, how are we actually spending it and what do we value? And I said to Amy at the time, I said, I think this could take about 2 years for us to really unwrap all this stuff because, we built a pretty big lifestyle.
And is she in it with you on this? Like, is she like 100%. Totally game? Let's talk. I mean,
I read all the finance books and geek out on that stuff. And I handle the investments and the paperwork and, just those things. But every single weekend, and you don't have to do this every weekend, but you could do it every month. But we like to do it every weekend. We look forward to it because it's a time where we get to connect and get deep into our goals and reward ourselves for doing a good job. But every weekend, either Saturday or Sunday morning, before anybody's up, we sit down and we go through our YNAB budget every week. So she's in YNAB and I'm on the other side of the table with the computer and all the accounts, and we're reconciling everything. And at the end of the month, we then do our budgeting for the next month. So every dollar has a job.
Even at your level. That's crazy, dude.
Yes.
I have to ask, Michael. I'm so interested in this.
Yeah.
Because at your level of cash, I mean, don't you just go, I have so much money. Like, I'm going to go eat a croissant, have a cappuccino. Like, at this point, like, who really cares? The money's working for you. The money. I mean, serious. I know. Yes. I'm not joking.
I appreciate that. Yes. There are other ways to do this. Certainly when you have what you'd consider disposable income, although I really moved away from that. I hate that term now because why would you dispose of your money? Like, are you going to take it and put it in a barrel and burn it?
Good point. Right.
So I think that when I was younger, I thought that wealthy people didn't look at prices. I thought wealthy people didn't look at the bill at the end of the night at dinner because fuck did it matter? Excuse my language. But actually, it's quite the opposite, because most wealthy people that I know look at the tab at the end of the night because they're conscientious and thoughtful about their money. One of the reasons that some people have a lot more money than others is because they don't spend as much money. But it's a very, very simple equation. How much you have, how much you spend, whatever you're left over with, that's what you have. So you could certainly do it where you say, look, here's what we're saving. This is our savings. Everything else we just get to spend, and we don't look at it. We don't think about it otherwise. But the reason we do it is because it's helped us get clearer on what we actually value. Yeah. Sure, I could waste money on lots of things just as an exploration. Like, I don't know, maybe I want to do rowing. I'll go buy a $10,000 scull. Like, what? No. Figure out the way to do it as efficiently as possible to prove to yourself that you do value it before you put any money on it. So part of it is it's a value issue. It's not necessarily a have or a have not issue. So I think sometimes when people feel like they make a lot of money, they go, I don't want a budget. That's for poor people. I don't know. It's funny. I was in another conversation with somebody else. It was a kind of tense conversation. I was a party to it, but not directly involved. And it was about money. And we were talking about the budgeting we do. And this other person said, well, I don't even do a budget. And they make probably the average American income. So it would stand to reason that they should do a budget too. But there's this assumption that wealthy people don't budget.
Right.
I'm not sure how you get wealthy unless you just made so much money that it was stupid. Like, I'm not making $50 million a year, but even then, wouldn't you want to do something meaningful with it instead of throw away $1 million here, throw away $1 million there? I don't know.
Gentlemen, I want to take a minute to talk with you about the Brotherhood, a group of men that I have the privilege of connecting with every day. These are the men that help me stay focused on being a family man with a business, not a businessman that happens to have a family. And throughout the year, we have deep conversations, real conversations, and share the best resources around 6 areas of life: thriving marriages, intentional parenting, vibrant health, emotional intelligence, business evolution, and wealth and legacy. Here's what one of our members has to say about their experience.
I want to recognize everyone that really made the commitment and the decision and gave themselves the permission to fully show up and just share. I think all the speakers obviously were awesome, amazing content, but I think the real magic comes from everyone else speaking their minds and sharing what they're feeling, what's connecting and resonating with them. And I think it's a little comments that you might not realize that you say that's going to stick with someone else and really make a lasting impression.
Look, guys, the time is now to pour into your family. I read an article by Tim Urban that rocked me to put everything into perspective. He said that 93% of the time that he, as a child, would ever spend with his mom and dad, by his calculations, happened before the age of 18. 93% of the time he'd ever spend with mom and dad happened before the age of 18. I feel confident that saying that no matter how old your kids are right now, the time is to go all in on your family. In the Brotherhood, we have members with kids that are newborns, and we have guys whose kids are grown adults. It's never too late to be a great parent, and the journey never ends. No matter how great you are at fatherhood, and you might be the best out there maybe, or marriage, or juggling work and family life, this community can help you be better. If you're ready to take the next step, go to frontrowdads.com and click Join the Brotherhood.
Well, to your point, I'm at dinner a week ago, with a guy who probably has a net worth of 30 million, give or take, right? And he gets the bill, he covers the bill. He and I always have a bet trying to figure out who can pick up the bill first. So he is generous in that way. And he got the bill this time, looked at it, noticed that was like an extra $40 charge that shouldn't have been on there.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught it and then addressed it with the waitress. She removed the $40. And it was just after we had a conversation around how he bought a used car just recently, and that his wife was getting a car, but it was a very modest car. And I walked away from that conversation just realizing what true wealth feels like as well, to where it actually is not the weight and the burden of having that much money and the unhealthiness that it can create in his life, but he actually is living a very intentional life with just a lot of insurance in the bank, a lot of backing, a lot of potential freedom if he wanted it, but he's not spending it because he has to prove a point that he has it, which is a beautiful thing to see because it's really rooted in what his values are.
Yeah. John, we just bought a Volvo station wagon. I literally just arrived last week. We bought it from one of those auto lender places where they send it to you. And it had 60,000 miles and was from 2017. And it cost $26,000.
Yeah.
Now that's high because the market is crazy now right, for cars. But still, it's just a nice little wagon. It's going to be great. What do we need? I mean, okay, so we could spend $70,000 on a car. We could spend like $120 and get the fanciest Tesla. But I've driven fancy cars. I like them. But okay, put it this way. You know how some of these people say, well, when you have more money, you have more problems? More money, more problems. You've heard that.
Yep, yeah.
Okay, I only think that's the case when you spend all of the money you have. because then you're trying to catch up with all of those expenses. So you're hustling all the time to try to make more money.
Yeah.
But if you take the money and you don't have any debt anywhere, look, the home is mortgage is a big debate in the financial community because on one hand, if interest rates are very, very low, keeping a mortgage on a house, if you have less than a 3% interest rate on it, might make sense if you're going to if instead of paying it off, you put that money into the market.
Sure. And
you get a higher return. So the arbitrage is, net is positive for you. Well, some people say, yeah, that's true. But of course, if the market is not in a bull run for 10 years, you actually would do better paying off your house. So you don't actually know what's right or wrong. Most of the math suggests that you should keep the mortgage, but you may just want the freedom of not having a mortgage,
right?
Not having some bank that owns your house. Just you want to own it. That's a nice feeling. I've got my house, and then you want to sell it, you can. So that's, again, those are things that are personal,
And there is an argument also for this opens up a whole other can of worms for a conversation that if there's a dramatic shift from a government standpoint, there could be a point when the only time you would get to keep your house is if you actually owned it outright. But if the bank owned your house and there was a massive governmental shift, that might not be a very safe position for you to be in. An argument for owning your property outright.
Yeah. And I suppose if the government really wanted your house and you owned it, they could probably still take it.
They could still take it. Yeah.
Here's the thing, we're in this very, new time for us. I'm a little older than you are, but still, we're still from the same generation, I think. I'm not sure.
We are. Yeah, I'm 46. You're 52.
51. Yeah. 51. So you're Generation X then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're Generation X. This is the first time we've ever seen so much conflict internally in our country.
Totally.
We weren't here during Vietnam when things were a mess. And, we kind of skated through without too much of that. And now it's coming. So there's a lot of doom and gloom, and there's a lot of people worried that everything is going to end. And it may. But I've decided I'm not going to worry about it because if everything does end, then it's over. Meaning, like if the stock market crashes, the stock market crashes and never recovers, ever.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to have much bigger problems than how big my portfolio should have been at that time.
Yeah.
It's just my theory. If the entire economy of the United States collapses, so yeah, do what you can, keep yourself safe. But for me personally, there are so many different things that I worry about, and there's only a few things I could do something about, and I can't do anything about whether or not the whole society collapses. I really don't think. Maybe someone could tell me that I could, but I don't think so. And I find that as the kids get older, I have to work so much harder on not worrying so much about them, because they're in that transition where they're starting to become people, not just children who just parrot everything you say, who believe whatever you believe, and are attached to you, and their identity is really, the attachment to you. Well, then they get to be 16, 17. All of a sudden, just naturally, from an evolutionary perspective, biological perspective, psychological perspective, they want some independence.
Yeah.
They want to stand on their own 2 feet. They've got their own ideas. They want to debate it. They want to argue with you. And it's been a lot of work to transition from I'm supposed to tell you what to do. I'm supposed to keep you safe. I'm supposed to have the answers. And to step back and say, these are your choices now. So what I said to Jake, I said, listen, Jake, because Jake's always been really responsible. I said, let's try something. How about I nag you about nothing? Like, I just never nag you. I don't nag you about your homework. I don't nag you about anything. And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Dad. I'd like that.
Sold.
I was like, but here's the deal. You get to have a decision over everything. I mean, within reason, right? Obviously. But you get to have decisions over everything that's relevant to you. But I get to talk to you about these decisions whenever I want, within reason. But coming out of that discussion, it's 100% your decision. You're just going to, and I might debate it with you. I might say, I think
this is awesome.
I was like, but you have to be willing to debate it with me so that you can back up your justification for whatever it is you're doing. But at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want, even if it's diametrically opposed to what I suggested or hoped you would do. With no guilt, I will not give you any grief about it. How about that? He's like, what would be that different? Because I really just choose what I want to do now. I was like, yeah, but I think it'll feel different.
How old is he?
He's 17.
17, yeah.
And already I see it's working. He asked me to go. He's like, can we go away for like a weekend and do nothing, like a Bill Gates kind of thing where he just reads? I was like, boom. Amy went on Airbnb, found us a place. We got this little place on a pond in the middle of nowhere. And that was actually just last weekend. So that's the hardest thing. But this transition into, this next stage is so important. And one of the big things I think we have responsibility for is to try to give them a good financial education. And then after that, it's up to them.
Mm. Well, okay. I have to mention, I didn't see that coming, but that's so fun to think about, man, that I won't nag you, but it's all your choices. You just have to agree to talk with me.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's your choice, but you just got to hear me out.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah. Look, because even something simple, like he's in AP Computer Science.
Yeah.
And AP Computer Science doesn't have a class. It's all online, even though they still, go into school. That's just the way the class has always been. So you technically don't have to do your homework until the last day of the marking period. So essentially he's got an F throughout the whole marking period. And then does all his homeworks in the last 2 weeks, and he'll get an A. But it makes me nuts because it's such bad planning. I was like, it means you're not going to be able to, what if you have another test? You can't study, you know the drill. So I was like, look, if that's the way you want to do it, that's fine. I'm not going to say anything about it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's up to you. It's your choice. But you have to let me talk. Once I've said my piece, I'll be done.
Yeah.
But you have to let me say it once.
Yeah.
Because generally when they feel like it's your decision.
And I won't stop talking until you agree with me.
And they'll just fight with you on it.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to hear it because it feels like nagging.
Yeah.
And so, that seems to be working well.
Did you ever hear Adam Grant talk about procrastination? And he has, I don't remember what book it was in, maybe Originals. It was in Originals, I believe. But he talks about the guys from Warby Parker, and, they were his students. The basic story is that the kids who started with the young guys who started Warby Parker were Adam Grant's students, and came to Adam Grant and said, would you like to invest? And Adam saw these guys procrastinating. He's like, so you're launching this summer and you don't have a name and you don't have a business plan and you all have jobs as backup plans in case this business doesn't work. yeah, I'll pass. So
I remember that.
Yeah. So, the idea that procrastination can serve you at times and why procrastinators are sometimes very powerful in their approach. Very interesting thought. Not the point of what you're saying, but no, I appreciate this idea. What it's sparking for me, Michael, is how I want to talk to Tiger. It's giving me new language, which I think is the benefit of this show in many ways, is that a guy hears how you talk to your son, and then he can maybe, my Tiger's 12. So mine might sound a little bit different, but I could see myself instantly, like immediately this week saying, look, it's your choice, but all you have to do is hear me out. Like the agreement is I'll let you decide, but you have to hear my pitch, and I'm like channeling my Michael Port, in the Vroman house. That I think is the benefit of community and conversation and storytelling, because we get to experiment in our minds first, and then we get to take elements or pieces of this and bring it back into our world.
That's right.
So maybe somebody checks their bill a little bit differently at the end when they, previously thought that's not what wealthy people do, but now they might see that differently, or they might have, instead of just gravitating towards the NFT world or the crypto world because it's just this shiny object that's pulling at their attention and they don't want to miss out, they might go back to more principle-based investing or looking at their money differently.
Yeah. And there's another suggestion that I have, if I may be so
Please.
bold, is to encourage those who want to learn more about personal finance and investing to stay off the social media platforms for their learning. Meaning, there are great Facebook groups and I'm sure groups and other platforms where they have lots of people gather together who want to talk about personal finance, saving, etc. And there's a lot of really interesting discussions. Sometimes they're fun to read for entertainment purposes. And some of the advice may actually be accurate and even helpful. But it's a little bit like if you're a speaker and you go up on stage to work on some new material and there's 100 people watching you and you get off the stage and you go, okay, so what should I do to make it better? And you get 100 people giving you their feedback. First of all, a percentage of them are going to have no idea what they're talking about. Another percentage of them are just going to have their own agenda because they like it better this way than another way. It doesn't mean it's better. And another percentage is just going to make something up, even though just to try to be helpful, say something nice, even if it didn't work, which won't be helpful either. That's a little bit like what it's like to learn on Facebook. And so I think that if there are areas that we need to learn more about, if it's things like learning about, just sort of basic ETF or index fund investing, like just some, really sort of foundational stuff, then we can seek out a book that specifically addresses that from somebody who doesn't have conflicts of interest. Like I would recommend staying away from, say, like Tony Robbins wrote a big book on money, but it's filled with conflicts of interest because there's lots of different things that he's promoting in there that he is compensated for, but he's not telling you he's compensated for it. That's a conflict of interest. When it comes to money, that's one of the biggest issues that we have, because how do you know that if your interests aren't aligned, generally, if you're the buyer, you're not going to do as well. And I'm not saying that everything that he wrote in his book is wrong. I'm not addressing that at all. I'm just saying if there's a conflict of interest, there's a problem. And unless you know what they are, you can't avoid them. You can get sucked into it. So I'd say, that's helped me a lot, is to stay off those platforms and just really put together a learning program with books written by people who really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got to find out, who are those authors, and you got to talk to people who you can trust, and then don't take their word for it. Talk to 20 people that you trust and see if you get a consensus.
So here's where I want to go from here for our last couple of minutes. So one is I want to give some practical steps for people, or some suggestions, some resources. So I'd love to hear from you to say, look, if a guy's going to take his current business and he's going to start investing in other businesses that can create cash flow, as an example, right? Where we started the conversation, maybe a question around that is, where did you start to invest? Where might you point somebody to start to invest? Is it real estate? Is it, whatever? So let's start there with like actually a thread that somebody could follow, or a book suggestion or something to give them next steps?
Sure. So I don't invest in individual real estate, nor do I invest in syndications, but I own real estate through the stock market. I don't invest in other startup businesses, but I do invest in the total market, which has new public companies, which is essentially like a startup business, but in the public, that the public can own. So I want as a few single points of failure as possible. Well, a couple of things. Take real estate, for example. Real estate, if you want to own lots of properties, even if you use a management company to maintain and manage those properties, it's still a ton of work. And it's still, you have to know that this property is going to produce cash flow and appreciate for you over time. And for some people, it's incredibly effective, but generally it's effective for the people who spend all their time doing it. That is, in fact, what they do. It is not what I do. I don't want to study it. I've read probably 15 books on real estate investing. And every time I get about halfway through it, I'm like, I do not want to do any of this. I had a property that I rented out once. It was a freaking nightmare. Now, other people have different experiences. There isn't one way to do it. This is my way. Yeah. I'm only here to talk about my way.
I'm with you. I love your honesty, Michael. I love it. It's so good talking to you, buddy.
So good talking to you. So I might have to look at, okay, where can I actually use my skills to produce the most money? And that's producing more profit in the business. Okay. But anything that comes out of the business, I don't want to have to work on.
Correct.
So for me, it's all stock and bond market investing. Mm-hmm. And I use very few bonds just because I don't feel I need them, given A, the size of my portfolio, my risk tolerance, my long-term horizon, et cetera. And somebody else may feel differently. But this way, I can set it and I can forget it. And then I can focus on doing work, A, that I like doing and I'm good at. I don't need lots of exotic investments. Neither do you. I don't think anybody does. The idea is people like the idea of an exotic investment because it's a good story, sexy.
Totally.
If you're right, man, it's a home run. Just knock it out of the park. Everybody's impressed. But for me, it's really, really quite simple. So I think part of it is identifying where's the best use of my time. And if it is producing more cash flow in the business, that's fantastic. Because then as long as you are taking that cash flow and then investing it for the next, for decades and decades and decades, then you're going to be fine. You're going to do great. Other people might say, I want to invest in syndications. It's pretty hands off, but then you got to pick the right sponsor. For the real estate project. You got to know. Oh, and then someone else says opportunity projects. Here's another good one. A good friend of mine, you definitely know him. I won't mention his name. Said he often will contact me when he gets pitched something because he's very successful. And he says, what do you think of this? And I always say, I'm not a professional, but I'll tell you my opinion. And he said, look, someone recommended I invest in an opportunity zone because, I just sold a whole bunch of stock and I want to avoid the capital gains taxes. I was like, who doesn't want to avoid capital gains taxes? Although it's long-term capital gains, there's only 20%. But the idea of paying taxes is just not particularly appealing. So we get excited about these other things. So the opportunity zone, I looked through it, I read all the prospectus, read the whole thing. I went online, I studied the people who were involved in it. It was a massive undertaking by a small group of people who had a very short little track record. And they were already underwater. It was already losing money, this investment. And yes, it's an opportunity zone, but you have to stay in it for a minimum of 5 years for this benefit, then 10 years for this benefit. So all your money's locked up. You may not actually get any appreciation on that money. And then, so you got a tax deduction of 20%, but you may also lose money because the whole thing may fall apart. So I walked him through this and he's like, oh my God, thank you. Because the guy made it sound like it was the greatest thing in the world. There's no other reason to do it.
Exactly.
If you took that same money and left it in the market in just a diversified ETF, total stock market fund, and you left it there for 30 years, you might not get 20% every year, but maybe you get 10% every year. But it's just a much safer way to go long term than these individual kind of schemes for either tax savings or for quick hits.
The other thing I want to mention about what you just said, Michael, that I think is really important to note for our audience, and especially those people that are already members of Front Row Dads, the Brotherhood, is like what we're trying to do is three things. It's first relationships, then resources, then results. And what you just articulated is exactly what our model is built on. Guy calls you up and says, what do you think? Right? That's a brotherhood. You don't have to have access to the number one expert in the world. You just need to have good conversation, honest conversation with somebody you trust. You ultimately provide a resource, which is a way of thinking about something, how you question it, how you look at it. That's being resourceful in this endeavor. And then he has potentially a different result than what he would have had at the beginning part of the conversation. So I want to acknowledge that I think for everybody in the world, if you're trying to build wealth, that you can listen to this podcast and other podcasts and have all these ideas, but ultimately what you should have ongoingly are great conversations with people you trust around these subject matters. And finances is one of the ones that could be a little tougher because it feels a little taboo and things like you shouldn't talk about, but you do need people that you can bounce these ideas off of, just like we're talking about today.
You know, if it stays taboo and people don't talk about it, that's really helpful for the financial industry. That works for them because when we make bad decisions, generally they make money.
Right.
When we make really good decisions, generally the financial industry doesn't make money. Someone asked, so there's a couple books that I think would be really helpful, both for the way, how to think about money and then also what to do practically. Mm-hmm. So one of the two books that had the most influence over me from I think a psychological perspective, or even an emotional perspective, just changed the way I thought, was the first time that I read Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robbins.
Okay.
That, for many people, is a tour de force of holy cow. Wow, I got to redefine what enough is. Now, she's very frugal. She talks a lot about frugality. I'm not necessarily suggesting anybody needs to be frugal to an extreme. Sometimes it actually can be problematic. Some people are so frugal, it becomes a compulsion. But that's a great one. So hers is a little bit older. It's a little more sort of down to earth. The next book is The Psychology of Money. That book is sophisticated. It's big picture oriented. It's a whole series of stories that will literally punch you in the gut by the end. It's so well written. And I recommend everybody read that book. I love that book. Then from a practical perspective, I think the best book for most people is The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. The Simple Path to Wealth. Now, maybe the average person who's reading it makes less money than some of the front row dads, but the principles all apply. Plus, he's, I think, the real deal and just lovely. And if you like listening to audiobooks, he's got one of those grandfatherly voices, deep and rich and slow. And it just sounds great. When you listen to him, you're like, oh, I got this. I can do this. Someone asked him, he was doing an interview at Google, for one of their talks. So if you look on YouTube for a J.L. Collins interview at Google, I'm sure you can find it. Someone asked him about financial advisors. Do you need a financial advisor? And some of my best friends were financial. No, I have a lot of friends one of my best friends runs a hedge fund. Another one is an analyst at Barron Funds. And I'm very, very close with Matt Zepka, who you've had on the program. He does all of our accounting. But most of us don't need a financial advisor to whom we pay a percentage of the assets that they have under management. That for us, we may need some advice from time to time that we can pay for by the hour. But he was asked, do you need a financial advisor? And he said, well, by the time you know enough to pick a good financial advisor, you'll no longer need a financial advisor. Mm-hmm. Look, again, it's not my business what people do, but if you want to build any kind of wealth long-term, if you just want to build stability long-term, if you want to have choices long-term, this is an area where we are very well served by learning the fundamentals. We don't have to become masters at it, but if we don't know the fundamentals, someone else is going to eat our lunch and take advantage of us, not because they're bad people, because that's the way the system is set up. And some of them may be not so nice people too.
And you suggested also to me years ago, I remember where we were standing downtown Philly when you told me about the little book of common sense investing.
Yep, that's another great one.
John Bogle, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately made a strong case for the Index 500 investment, period. Like end of day of all the things you could consider, all the options you have, like there you go, right? A low fee.
Yeah. Well, look, John, I think that the argument that exists in the personal finance space is it really, can you beat the market or can you not beat the market? Or is the best thing an index fund? Or should you slice and dice so you can get a little bit of an edge? Yeah, a couple of percentage points every single year makes a difference long term. But if you want to keep it simple, know that you're not throwing your money away, know that you're going to do well enough, then you keep it simple.
Exactly.
If you want to buy a total world fund or a total US stock market fund,
it also gives you, if we go back to the real purpose of this show, is it gives you bandwidth to be present with your family.
Thank you very much.
You really want to know at the end of the day, like what I see, and I'm surrounded by hundreds of high performing business owners and entrepreneurs. The one thing that I've built my life on is a network of incredible people. That's what I do best more than anything else.
Yeah.
And what I see some of them suffering at the hands of constant an indulgence in information that keeps them from talking to their kids, because if they don't figure out NFTs now, they're screwed. If they don't figure out crypto now, they're screwed. And then what happens is they do that every year, every quarter, year after year. And next thing you know, it's like they blink and it's over. The dad ride is done. And I hope that simplicity is one of the things that people keep taking away from this, because that's what's needed for this group more than anything. Because our group is what you described earlier. It's the maximizers. It's the people who can't get enough, the ones who are up early and up late and do efficiency. I was geeking out with my friend Qasim Aslam the other day about how we were measuring how many minutes we'd save and how much time that gave us back over the course of a lifetime. And he's like, he held up a pair of shoes that had no laces. He's like, 4.5 days. 4.5 days. I go, what does that mean? He goes, it takes me on average 45 seconds to put on my shoe. If I don't have to tie out my shoelaces, 4.5 days is what I earn by having slip-on shoes, right?
Right.
So we obsess over this.
I know. And actually,
get back to your kids.
It might be nice, and you actually might have a moment of breathing room when you tie your shoes.
Yeah, there's benefits to all of it, for sure. For sure. Yeah. But a lot of it is knowing, it's being intentional and conscious is what it is. And a lot of times when you get onto Facebook or social media or any of that, you're getting hijacked. Yeah. You're getting wrapped up in somebody else's objectives and story versus being the director of your own show.
Yeah. Look, most of what I talk about is not particularly controversial because I teach public speaking. So there aren't like a lot of people out there arguing about public speaking. Although, there might be a few, but for the most part, I don't get a lot of people going, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a little afraid after talking about finance and saying, well, stay away from permanent life insurance policies unless you know exactly why and you've done the research and you've really mastered this. Stay away from this. And I'm going to get all these emails, like, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. You're just an idiot. I'm like, okay, sorry. But that's right. Everybody does it their own way.
You said it. You're just sharing your story, and that's what we should be allowed to do. It's not, it's one way of doing it. There's lots of ways of doing it. Sure. Guys, I just want to say this. Michael, thanks for the time today. I want to say to the audience, thanks for listening. I'll have said this, I'm sure, in the intro, but I'd like to say it again in case somebody jumped in late. Guys, I found Michael because I was in the world of speaking for years. I had already won awards. Somebody had gifted me a ticket maybe to one of Michael's events. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who that person was at this point, but thank you to whoever that was, because I was in the audience and I'm listening to Michael. I'm like, this guy's brilliant. His wife, Amy, is brilliant. And I walk up to him at the end and I say, Michael, I said, I know you've got this program that you run, but I'm already, I'm making good money as a speaker. And I don't remember what I had said at the time, but it was something like, I think 7,500. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. And you looked at me, Michael looks at me and he says, would you like to make $25,000 a speech? And I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, well then sign up. And I was like, done. and I signed up instantly and super grateful for that experience because of a couple things. One, I ended up getting eventually what was a $35,000 speaking fee. Thanks to my work with Michael and his business, I not only was a more confident speaker, I was delivering the message I wanted to give to the world as a result of my time with Michael and Amy and the rest of the team that was there. I also want to say that I met some incredible people that have become a permanent part of my life. Matt Zepka, who you mentioned a minute ago, is a front row dad. He's been to our retreats. He is my CPA. He's a great friend. And that bridge wouldn't have been built without heroic public speaking in the grad school program. I also have spent some personal time with Michael and Amy. I remember fondly being out on the boat with you guys. And I've now been able to see your world from several different angles. But the one thing that is for certain is that I am always impressed, always enriched, and always just walk away feeling like a more centered, deliberate, and conscious human after our conversations, Michael. And I just wanted to say thank you for being yourself and then sharing a little bit of that with me and now the rest of the Front Row Dad community. This conversation couldn't have gone any better. It was fun. It was light. It was meaningful. It was real. You brought us into your world. You opened up. I hope that people continue to connect with you in whatever endeavor you pursue next. I know heroic public speaking, guys, if you have any interest in not only learning the art of public speaking, but perfecting the art of public speaking or mastering or enhancing or growing, no matter what level you are, a beginner or advanced, you've got to look into the work that Michael and Amy are doing at Heroic Public Speaking. And then also, I hope that you let me know what your thoughts are on this show. But as I've said on many, many other shows, if you enjoyed this and you write a review, go to frontrowdads.com/review. Let us know what you liked about this episode specifically. Screenshot that, send it to our team at info@frontrowdads.com. I'll mail you any one of Michael's books that you want. On the house, my treat. I'll mail it out to say thank you. Michael, that's it, man. I know you've got to run to another appointment, but you can have the final words here, man. If there's anything you want to say, it's all yours.
Yeah, sure. Two things. Number one, if any of the Front Row Dads want to reach out and just ask any questions, get any resources, I'm pretty easy to find. Michael@heroicpublicspeaking.com. Not complicated. And then number two, I'm so happy you're doing what you're doing. And I wish you were still on the speaking circuit, because I think you were and are, of course, still one of the most skilled speakers that I've seen. And I think I've seen most of them. Can't say that I've seen all of them. But you are a unique talent and you're also quite skilled. So, maybe someday people will get you back on the stage a little bit more, not just the Front Row Dads, but we, the circuit misses you. That's all I'll say. Thanks, Michael. Guys, thanks for listening today. Share this episode with somebody that would value considering these resources, ideas, either has an interest in wealth or wants to have an interest in wealth, needs to have an interest in wealth. And that's it. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon. Appreciate you too. Gentlemen, thanks for listening to the show today. 2 actions to take from here. First, implement one thing that you learned from the interview. And number 2, share this episode with somebody who values being a family man with a business. If you're enjoying the Front Row Dad podcast, the biggest thanks we ever get are honest reviews. So thank you for your feedback in advance. We read all of them. And if you want to learn more about the Brotherhood, which is our private community of 200 men from 6 different countries, visit frontrowdads.com for more info. If you're wondering what the hell the Brotherhood is all about, I'll leave you with some real feedback from guys who are active members and why they are part of our crew. Thanks again for listening to the show, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
You had this passion for wanting to find a way to make you a better parent and a better husband, just better in general. And so you developed this community of like-minded men that aspire to be better and aspire to put family first and business second. And so to me, there's no greater place I'd rather be. People ask me all the time, like, if I could only pick one group, mastermind, organization, whatever to be part of besides my own, it's always yours. And that's it. And by the way, part of that has to do with you and the leader you are and the way that you treat people and how you show up and the level of preparation that you have and the quality and amount of value that you offer. And then part of it's in the community that's been assembled and these unbelievable like-minded men that show up willing and ready to serve and to give and to share. And so to me, there's no better place that I can be spending my time. I look at 2 different things that we can be doing with our time. One of them is growing relationships and starting first with the most important relationships. And the other one is growing our financial acumen and our wealth to be able to do the things that we want to do and have impact and be able to spend time with the people that we value most by buying that time back. So to me, what you do and what I do is a great marriage of what I think is most important. And I would also throw in there that health is, the other component of that. And I feel like the community that you've built, that each of us have built, is also centered around that, because you talk about being a great husband, parent, that's going to come from taking care of yourself and making sure that you have the energy to be able to serve. And I do the same thing on a wealth standpoint, because wealth to me is not just about money. It's actually about having the time and the space to have your personal health. I would take having great health over no money any day of the week, rather than the inverse of that, having a lot of money but no health. So to me, those are like the three most important components. And to me, we're always merging those three in the things that we each do. And so I think that's why there's a lot of crossover of, members. That's why what you do resonates so much with me. What I do resonates so much with you. I joined as a lifetime member for that small little window where you offered it. I'm like, I'm in, because I know if I'm going to commit my time anywhere, this is it, because it makes me a better man, makes me a better husband, makes me a better father. It encourages me to really step up my peer group with other like-minded men so that I can be on mission, on point with other people that will hold me accountable at the highest level.
John and I met a year and a half ago with the launch of my first book. And as we were going through the interview, I began to ask him questions about the Brotherhood, and it resonated within me that a community of like-minded, like-hearted men that wanted to win, as he was just saying, at business and in life. And I'd reverse that. I wanted to win as a dad, and then I'd also love to be successful in business, because I feel like if I don't get the dad right, who cares what I did in business? That's my legacy. That's what lives beyond me. So to tribe up with a bunch of dudes going in the same direction with the pillars that are in place, and the way that not only are you encouraged, compelled, you're chided, you're laughed with, but you get to pace yourself, but you can get around a band of dudes that you can trust, you can share with, you can grow with. And just recently completed a time with these guys. We did a fast at the start of the new year. Every day I would tune in to the little app where we were sharing comments, and I was so impressed how you could see guys that were further down the road and things like this, guys that were just starting, and the camaraderie, the encouragement. So for myself, this was a total fit, and I would encourage any dude that's looking for a place where you can feel connected with a band of guys wanting to go in the same direction. Front Row Dad's for you.